We speak now to Dieu Do from the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee, or MIRAC. Dieu Do, welcome to MEE, and thank you so much for joining us. Could you just paint us a picture from what you've seen on the streets today? We've just learned Greg Bovino will be leaving, ICE's presence may be reduced. Is that enough to pacify local protesters like yourself?
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me today. And you know, when we learned that Gregory Bovino was going to be ordered to leave Minnesota, and there's a number of agents being ordered to leave, um, we shouldn't expect a fascist government to act in good faith. And there's been no public details, no transparency about how many agents are leaving, about the timeline and what this will look like. And ultimately, it's not enough. We've seen two neighbors now be killed by ICE with no investigation, no accountability. We've seen countless protesters and observers and everyday people like myself being brutalized and harmed by ICE agents. And we need to demand more. We shouldn't let our guard down and think that, this new tactic that they're using is acting in good faith. We should continue to have our guard up, and we should continue to protect neighbors and community members like we have been the last year, but especially since Operation Metro Surge started.
But what does that look like? I mean, some activist groups, some protesters, they're working to monitor ICE, preaching non-intervention, stand back and just observe. Others are actively obstructing ICE agents attempting to carry out raids. Can I just ask, what is your approach, or what is your organization's approach to direct intervention against ICE's actions?
Yeah, there's been, a variety of tactics being used and strategies used by the community. We've seen folks do community patrolling where they, stand in street corners, especially on streets along cultural corridors where there's a lot of immigrant-owned businesses and people of color own their businesses, and are keeping watch of suspicious activity, of suspicious vehicles, and reporting it to their local neighborhood rapid response network as soon as they see either ICE agents or people suspected to be ICE agents. Because ICE agents know that when they're being watched, when there's people observing, that they're less likely to detain someone and less likely to harm people. So we've been doing that. There's been folks who have been, protesting really early in the morning at the Federal Whipple building where ICE agents leave for the day to go terrorize our communities. And they've been, tracking when ICE agents leave and in what direction, all the way to tracking different license plate numbers and just like that kind of information and details of ICE agents as well. So there's a variety of tools being used to patrol the community, but also a variety of tools being used for mutual aid to support individuals and families directly.
But none of what you described just then sounds like what the Trump administration is depicting on the streets, of people like yourself violently intervening against ICE agents. How would you respond to that depiction of what's going on in Minneapolis?
Yeah, I mean, they're more worried about the protesters and what we're protesting, at the end of the day. And yeah, it's incredibly infuriating as someone who lives in Minnesota, as Minnesotans who are experiencing the federal occupation of Minnesota, and seeing this rhetoric and seeing this disinformation being spread about what's happening. Minnesotans have been practicing our constitutional rights, and our constitutional rights are being violated by the federal government. And they're going on TV, going on press tours, saying that we're being violent when they're the ones who have been using tear gas, pepper spray, flashbangs, and as we've seen, has killed members of our community. I don't think there's anything that protesters can do to justify the level of violence that the federal government has perpetuated. And there's nothing that we can do to escalate the situation. Everything that they've done is just they've chosen to escalate. There's nothing we can do to give them more reason to escalate.
And how representative are your views and the views of other protesters of the views, citywide or statewide? We can trace the government's decision, right, to launch ICE's biggest campaign in Minnesota, specifically to Trump's controversial comments about the local Somali community back in December, right? He described them as garbage in clearly racist terminology. But he was also referring to a specific fraud scandal in which some Somalis have been convicted. Now, just to be clear, for everyone watching, data on crime and immigration in America consistently shows a negative correlation. So foreign nationals statistically commit less crime than natives, but perception matters. Not speaking for yourself, speaking, broadly here. How concerned are people in Minnesota about rising immigration, about unauthorized immigration? Are there any who welcome ICE's presence?
I think it's an issue that's top of mind for every single person in Minnesota. I mean, on Friday, we had the first general strike in the US in 80 years, and the protest was in Minneapolis, the march was, and over 200,000 people were at the march. I think that just speaks to the level of power and the level of solidarity that folks are feeling on the ground. It's top of mind for everyone. And, ICE has been an entity that's terrorized our communities since 2003 through multiple presidential administrations. But I think, especially in this moment, we see when there's a federal government agency with unchecked power, with no oversight, with seemingly boundless resources and funds, you see the level of terror, the level of brutality, and the level of just constitutional violations that they're willing to commit. So I think it's an issue that I think that's why Minnesotans are showing up so hard, because we understand, everyone understands in our state, it's not just about fighting for the rights of Minnesotans anymore. It's fighting for the rights of every person on American soil, because this is going to threaten every person's rights, no matter who you are in this country.
Thank you for taking us through that. And just before we let you go, I'd love you to help people watching understand how the local police fit into all of this. It's not been many years since Minneapolis saw massive protests break out in the form of Black Lives Matter marches. This was following the murder of George Floyd by a local police officer, Derek Chauvin. Now, back then, it was local police at the heart of public anger. Today, it's federal agents, and local police chiefs have been among those criticizing their presence. As a protester in Minneapolis right now, how do you feel about the local police's role in all this? Do you feel that they're a protective layer against the federal agents, or the opposite?
I think that I think many folks in Minnesota don't feel protected by local law enforcement. And that hasn't changed since the federal occupation in Minnesota. I think that, the Minneapolis police chief and other leadership in local law enforcement has been very vocal about their opposition to federal agents. But we've seen before this federal occupation that they have assisted federal agents in immigration enforcement. We've seen them support these activities. We've seen them not hold, themselves accountable for a number of different things, including collaborating with federal agents. But we also, there's no protective layer between the community and federal agents when there's police there. I think that folks at home should know that, at the end of the day, we keep each other safe and we protect each other, and the community grassroots is doing all these patrols to take care of the community. The police have been very vocal, but they have not done anything to make people feel more safe or more secure during this federal occupation.
Dieu Do, thank you so much for joining us and for that insight into your community and its mindset right now.